Tens of thousands of Palestinians are flooding Egypt on foot at this hour after a wall dividing the country from Gaza was demolished. The Palestinians are rushing to buy goods made scarce by an Israeli blockade of the impoverished coastal territory. Simon McGregor-Wood reports.
During the night, Palestinian militants blew holes in the border fence between Gaza and Egypt. And in the morning, ordinary Palestinians started flooding across. Tens of thousands so far today in search of supplies no longer available in the blockaded Gaza Strip. This morning, bulldozers were brought in to demolish parts of the fence not destroyed by the explosives. Thank God for this victory, he says. People are going over to bring goods, food, cement, flour, everything. And the patients can go and get treatment. All day, the traffic of people and goods has continued, everything from these goats to these much-needed medicines, while Egyptian border guards and Hamas police forces have stood to one side. Yesterday, there were violent clashes between Egyptian forces and Palestinians, mainly women organized in a Hamas demonstration, protesting at the continued closure of the border. It has been sealed since Hamas took control of Gaza last June. Israel has been imposing a strict blockade for months now, sealing all the border crossings in the last few days in response to an increase in Palestinian rocket fire against Israeli towns. Palestinians have complained of a humanitarian disaster. Today's dramatic development is a sign of the popular frustration and anger of people living in Gaza, all encouraged by Hamas. It is also an embarrassment for Egypt and a major security concern for Israel. Simon McGregor-Wood, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Michael Shank is the government relations advisor at George Mason University's Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution. What do you think led to this? What was the tipping point?
Kate, since the economic boycott of last year, 70–80% of Gazans are living on less than $2 a day. 70–80% of all industry factories have closed or are operating at 20%. So the humanitarian disaster that your reporter spoke of and the humanitarian crisis that the UN is speaking of is very real since the economic boycott. That led to a demand for food and fuel, which then led to the the flood to the Egyptian border.
Well, what about the shutting down of the power plant on Tuesday? That seemed to be when things escalated.
Yeah, certainly that was a tipping point. Israel shutting down the power plant led to widespread blackouts. That perhaps was the tipping point for the flood to the border.
So what do you think that this in any way will alter Israel's official policy regarding the wall, the blockade?
Kate, it's hard to tell. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice has encouraged Israel to relieve the humanitarian crisis in Gaza until U.S.-Israel change their tack towards Gaza. Right now, they're politically isolating Gaza. The economic boycott is aimed towards Gaza and Hamas. Until they change that tack, we're not going to see a whole lot of difference in Palestinian-Israeli relations, certainly within Gaza. Until they bring Hamas to the table, until they bring them into the Annapolis peace talks, we're not going to see much difference, unfortunately.
Okay, so people are flooding into Egypt, but are they going to stay there?
Well, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak has welcomed that traffic. They're not staying, they're coming in. Tens of thousands are coming in, getting food and fuel and leaving. It's not any kind of arms trafficking like Israel was concerned about. It's merely stopping for food and fuel and returning to Gaza.
All right, I guess they don't want to get stuck in Egypt, so they are returning home, so that may not be an issue. But you said, we talked about the weapons and the smuggling. I mean, they seem like they are valid fears if the border is open, because there were all those tunnels before where they said things were coming backwards and forwards, and they're not searching everybody as they cross at this time.
That's right, Kate. Certainly some of the illicit trafficking was occurring pre-rush of the border in the tunnels, as you speak of. Now, there is an interesting new development. Hamas has indicated that they're willing to work with Fatah and the Palestinian Authority to cooperate on borders and oversight of borders, and also in kind of pre-peace talks. Hamas has shown a willingness to talk with Palestinian Authority, so that is a good sign.
So how do you see this particular issue in the Middle East ending?
How will we see it ending? That's a difficult one as long as Hamas continues to be left out of the circle and left out of dialogue. That's U.S. foreign policy protocol not to speak with adversaries. Until that changes, we're not going to see much difference, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you very much for your thoughts today.
Kate, thanks for your time.